In this video, we're going to review the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, and I'll have you recite the letters after me, and then I'm going to talk about the letters that could have the dots in them, called dagesh, and then talk about the final forms of some of the letters, and then some of the letters that could be confused with one another, and then finally a few comments about the homework for Ross chapter 1. Here I have Ross page 20 and then the next page 21 with the alphabet. Let me have you repeat after me as we go through these. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, over to the right, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi, Kof, Resh, Sin, Shin, Tav. Let's say them again. Back to the beginning. Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samek, Ayin, Pei, Tzadi, Kof, Resh, Sin, Shin, Tav. I encourage you to slide the slider back on the video and review this over and over again until you can say them in order without needing my help and without having to repeat after me. Now, let me pull up a new page and I'll be able to jot some notes with you regarding the letters that can take the dagesh dot. There are 6 consonants in the Hebrew alphabet. We've already seen them as we previewed how to write them, but 6 consonants that could take a dagesh, a dot that indicates whether there was a cessation of airflow or a blockage of air before the explosion or the release of air. Those sound distinctions are not always followed in modern Hebrew, but they probably were followed in ancient Hebrew. Those 6 letters are known as the begadkepat letters. And that's a mnemonic device to help you remember the consonants. Forget about the vowels here, the E, A, E, and A. What we're focusing on are the consonants. The B, of course, represents Bet. The G represents Gimel. The D represents Dalet. The K represents a Kaf. Remember, not a Kof, but a Kaf. The P represents the Pei. And the T represents the Tav. Now, you notice that in English, we're pronouncing the B before the G. Begadkepat. But Hebrew is written from right to left. So in Hebrew, if they were to write begadkepat, they would start this way. So begadkepat, 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 Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Kaf, Pei, Tav. Now, let's think about what the begadkepat consonants do by way of sound. Remember, they can take the dot, the dagesh. The dagesh will always go roughly in the middle of the consonant. And then, of course, we have the begadkepat set that could occur with no dagesh. As we've discussed, when we have the dots. They are represented in English transliteration with no line. Plus dot means minus line. And that represents a stop consonant. A stop consonant is a consonant that stops all the airflow for split seconds and then releases. On the other hand, whenever these begadkepat consonants are dotless or without the dagesh, then they are transliterated in English with the consonants and a line below. These, historically, would have represented what is known as a fricative consonant. And a fricative consonant is simply one where the airflow does not stop, but rather is continuous in the pronunciation of the consonant. So, I'll pronounce these both probably the way historically they were pronounced, and then we'll talk about how to do it today. With the dot. B versus V. G with the dot without G. It's basically producing the same sound of the hard G, G, but instead of stopping the air, you're blowing the air through it. G, G. Very difficult to do. D with the dot and without, probably the, as in this, this, that. K, cough without the dot, with the dot, excuse me, without the dot, it is going to be ch, ch, like the CH of Bach, Bach. So stop, fricative, k, ch. The p with the dagesh dot is a hard p, p, stop consonant, and without the dagesh, a f sound, f. And then with the dot, the tav is a t, 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 stop consonant, and then here the tav is going to be pronounced also as a th, but as in thin, thin. Notice the difference between these two ths. One has vocal cord vibration and one doesn't. Just like the difference between dalet, d, and tav, t, is simply they're pronounced the same way except one vibrates the vocal cords. The d vibrates the vocal cords. We call that voicing. It's a voiced consonant. D, d, d. If you put your hand on your throat and say d, 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 you can feel your voice box vibrating. If you go over to the t and just go t, 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 you'll notice that your vocal cords do not vibrate. The t is unvoiced or voiceless. The d is voiced. Same thing with the ths here. The th of the d with the line under it would be the with voicing. And if the tav is lacking the dagesh dot, it's a voiceless th. Th, 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 as in thin, or Thor, the superhero. Now, which sets of these begadkepat consonants actually distinguish the sound today? The bet, the cough, and the pay. Almost everybody distinguishes these three. B, v, k, ch, p, f. The gimel, the dalet, and the tav, many people do not distinguish them. I will not require you to distinguish them. I will tell you, though, that I do sometimes distinguish these sounds, and not so frequently, and then quite frequently the T versus the TH. I will distinguish those, T versus the. So I'm going to kind of put a wavy line here to indicate that I frequently do that. And so you might want to practice doing that as well. So those are the begadkepat letters. Just to walk you through a few examples of how we might transliterate some of these. If I take this word in Hebrew, this is the word for sun, and it's pronounced bane. Bane. Notice the bet has a dagesh in it, and that means it's the hard B, the stop consonant B sound. B, bane. On the other hand, if I take this word, forget about the vowels there for a moment, but you're looking at the bet without the dagesh, this is pronounced av, not ab with a hard B, but the B is a fricative B. Av. And it sounds like a V sound. Av. How would I transliterate this? Again, I won't transliterate these vowel points because you don't know them in lesson 1 yet. But we have a B, and of course the B has a dot. Plus dot means minus line, so I'm not going to put a line underneath this. And then an N here. And if I knew my vowels, I would put N, E right there, but we're not going to worry about that. Just the consonants. Bet, noon. By the way, notice that that's a final noon. In my English transliterations, I do not specify final noons because it should be assumed that if an N in transliteration is at the end of the word, then it's representing a Hebrew final noon. Over here I have Av, and the first consonant is the Aleph. Remember, we're reading from right to left, so this is going to be the apostrophe looking thing. Remember, apostrophes are also written up higher, and the Aleph is written up a little bit higher, and then the Bet. And notice here, this Bet is lacking the dagesh dot, so that means minus dot in English means plus line here. Plus line. And then, of course, this is an A vowel, so if I were to write my vowel, it would be up there. We'll get to vowels in the next chapter. But those are your begadkepat letters. We could do another set using the kaf. Okay, so this is the word Cain, which means thus or so. And notice it has a dot or dagesh, so this is a K with no line, plus dot means minus line, and then the noon, Cain. On the other hand, we have the word for wisdom or wise. Here it's going to be wisdom. Excuse me, wise. The adjective wise is hakam. Hakam. So this is the one we're thinking of here. We're going to contrast this with that consonant there, right? They're both the same kaf, but this one has the dot, which means the K has no line under it. But here the kaf is going to be represented by a K with a line. Minus dot, plus line. The het, of course, has to go before, and it takes a dot underneath it. That dot is different than the dot of the dagesh, because this dot has to do with the English transliteration, so don't get those dots confused. And then the final mem goes next. So ha, cham, ha, cham. Okay? So fricative K, ha, 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 hard stop K, 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 k. King, ha, cham. There you go. Next, let's talk about the final consonants. The final consonants in Hebrew, there are 5 consonants that can take final forms. And they are, in the order of the Hebrew alphabet, the letters Kaf, Mem, Noon, Pei, and Tzadi. The final Kaf, as you remember, extends down below the line. Mem, the box. Noon extends below the line. Pei extends below the line. And final Tzadi extends below the line. Recall that when we say that these are final letters, that means that for any given Hebrew word, if a Kaf, Mem, Nun, Pei, or Tzadi has to occur as the last letter of the word, then you will switch to these final forms. Also notice that the Mem is the only one whose final form does not extend below the line. So you're going to always go below the line on the other four. Mem is the only one that's not going to extend below the line. So some of the words that Ross gives us here, I will not write the vowel points here, but this is the word lach, which means to you. Notice that the Kaf would have been written here, but since it's the final form, you can't put the non-final form of Kaf here, so you have to extend it and point it on the side there. So that's the proper way, not this way. We have the word for day, which is this. You've probably heard of the word Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. This is the Hebrew word Yom. Notice that the Mem here is not the non-final Mem, but the final one, Yom. We have the word for grace. Wonderful word in Hebrew. And the non-final Nun is not used here because chen, grace, ends with a Nun. It needs to be the final form. The word for hand or palm is Kaf. And the Pei at the end must be the final form, not the non-final one. And then the word for land, as in the land of Israel, is the word Eretz. Has a Sadi at the end, and notice the final Sadi must be used then. Eretz. Eretz Yisrael means the land of Israel. Let's now talk about some of the forms that can be confused with one another. We have the letters Beit and Kaf, which do look very similar. Beit and Kaf. Notice that these actually should be a little bit longer over here. Extend those just a hair. They're both rounded at the top, except we have this little extension. Kaf does not. It's rounded all the way across. So again, Beit, Kaf. They are similar enough, so you have to beware. We also have the problem of Gimel and Nun. Gimel, Nun. They're both skinny letters compared to the Kaf and Beit. These take up about half the width. Gimel, Nun, but notice they both have a little bit of a slant at the top. They're both skinny, except I have a foot here. So, Gimel, Nun. This next set of three is frequently confusing, and in the manuscripts of the Hebrew Bible, sometimes these are also written incorrectly, or they're written in such a way that they look like the other letters, so we have to be careful with these as well. We have Dalet, which is the D. We have the Resh, which is the R. Then we have the final Kaf. This, by the way, if we add the vowels EE, would be derech, which is the name Derek, and it means way. Dalet, resh, kaf. The dalet and the final kaf, they do look similar up at the top, but remember, final kaf always extends below the line, as do most of the other final letters. Resh is rounded. Remember, R, resh, rounded. Always rounded where the dalet and kaf are pointed. We also have tav, hey, and chet. Chet and hey do not have this foot that extends like the tav does right here. Hey has the opening, whereas tav and chet are closed. They all look very similar on the well, I guess it's the back side. It looks to me like the back side. It is the first thing you write, though. Among the skinny letters, we also have some other consonants that look very similar. So remember Zion, Vav, final nun. Zion, Vav, final nun. Again, these are all very skinny letters. And that's why they can be written in such a way that they are confused with one another. The mem and the tate sometimes can be confusing. Mem and tate. You really shouldn't be confused. You've got the opening here at the top of the tate, your opening down at the bottom left for the mem. Again, mem, tate. We also have the samic and the final version of the mem. Both of them extend a little bit here at the end, but the mem is always a box, samic is always rounded. If you know the Greek letter sigma, okay, and you just think of the samic as being a backward sigma, then you should be fine. You shouldn't get these confused. Now, we have the tzadi, which is similar to the ayin, but not quite. The sadi always goes back in the opposite direction of where the long diagonal line is. Ayin, there isn't any backward stroke. It stays. And then they both will always bring a half stroke to cross the bar. So, tzadi and ayin. And then your final tzadi has to extend below the line. This one is confused frequently for the ayin. So remember, the ayin is open on the left side. The tzadis are open on the right. So this is tzadi, final tzadi, and then the ayin in the middle. Again, tzadi, ayin, and final tzadi. And of course, the last set that's confused is the matter of dot placement. And you remember our little memory device. Sin is on the left, politically, and so if the dot's on the left, it's seen. And if the dot's on the right, it's sheen. Those are the letters that are frequently confused. For the last couple of minutes, what I want to do is talk with you about some of the homework and the transliteration exercises. So let's pull that up right now. Here I have the transliteration homework from Ross in front of us. And what I want to point out is that remembering that Hebrew reads from right to left. English reads from left to right. As you look at the transliteration exercises here, then on number 1, you're given the English transliteration and you're asked to provide the Hebrew that this represents. As you begin to write your Hebrew answers, then your Hebrew answers will have to go in which order? That's right. The Hebrew answers need to go from right to left. So what I suggest you do is on your page, let's pretend that this is your loose leaf notebook paper, and you're doing question A. You're giving it the Hebrew for the answer, so I suggest you start on the right side and you write your Hebrew letters out from right to left. The first English transliteration is the S with no diacritical marks. You need to give the Hebrew first from right to left. That would be solid, right? The next one is the S with the dot under it. That is, yes, that's Adi. The next one is the S with this diacritical mark. That would be right, Sheen. And then this S with that diacritic mark is going to have the dot on the left side, seen. Okay, so your Hebrew needs to go from right to left in the opposite order that your English went. Whatever the first English letter is has to be the first Hebrew letter going the other direction. Let's take a look at number 2. This is another example. The first English letter is the B. Your first Hebrew letter from the right heading to the left needs to be the B. Did you notice that if you have a begadkepat letter and there's no line, and that means in Hebrew plus dot. This kaf is a begadkepat letter, so I write the kaf. There's no line under it, so it needs a dot in Hebrew. The pei, is that a begadkepat letter? Absolutely, but there's no line under the pei, so the Hebrew needs a dot. Remember, plus dot in Hebrew means minus line in English. Minus dot in Hebrew is plus line in English. So make sure that you put these in the right order. The pei here is not specified as a final pei, so we're going to put the non-final pei here. Let's go ahead and look at the exercise number 1. And of course, we're beginning with Hebrew here, and we're being asked to give English transliteration. So for section B, on your homework, since we're writing English, we're going to follow the English convention of going from left to right. And the first English words that we need to put down here are not the last Hebrew word, but the first Hebrew word. Okay, so this has to be first. We're going to start with Aleph. Remember, Aleph looks like the apostrophe. The Lamed is an L. And then the final pei here, which in English we will not specify that it's a final pei, but since pei is a begadkepat letter, we have to ask, is there a dot, a dagesh? Do you see one? No. Minus dot means in English plus line. So we got to put the line under it to indicate that this is a pei with no dot. My next word will have to be the next English word here. So Zion. Zion's the first Hebrew word. Z must be the first English. Zion's the first Hebrew letter. Z must be the first English letter. Yod. and then noon. It happens to be final noon here, but in English we'll just put a noon. The assumption is that a noon at the end of a word will be a final noon in the Hebrew. Okay, so the next one would be, of course, DRK in that order. Dalet, Resh, Kaf. So I need to put Dalish, Ret, Kaf in English, but in the right order. The issue here is that when you sound out the English, you should be sounding out what the Hebrew represents. So if I can give an example, if you took this Hebrew word right here and you said, okay, I'm supposed to transliterate those 3 letters into English. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the aleph first. I'm then going to put an L in between, and I'm going to put a pei there. Okay, that's backwards. This is aleph lamed pei, but in English, since we're reading from right to left, you would be reading pei lamed aleph. But that's a completely different word than aleph lamed pei up here. So you have to get the order right. This is what we want to represent that, not this. And I hope that helps.